Late last night, while attention was fixed elsewhere, a quiet operation unfolded. A massive cargo aircraft accelerated down a poorly lit runway in Caracas. No media presence, no official statement, no registered flight plan. Moments after leaving Venezuelan airspace, its transponder was switched off, vanishing from civilian radar. But orbital satellites kept watching. The aircraft headed east, crossed open ocean, ignored familiar routes, and kept flying. Not toward the United States, not toward Europe. Its destination was Beijing. So the issue isn't whether something moved. It's what Caracas couldn't afford to leave behind. The mainstream media barely noticed. No headlines, no breaking news banners, just silence. But silence doesn't mean nothing happened. It means someone doesn't want questions asked. Because this wasn't an ordinary shipment. Venezuela didn't sell these assets on an open market. They didn't negotiate a price or wait for confirmation. They rushed. This wasn't a trade, it was an evacuation. A last-minute removal of something too valuable to leave behind. When a country moves wealth like this, it's not planning for growth, it's preparing for survival. Decisions like these are not made in daylight. They're made behind closed doors, under pressure, with clocks ticking and options disappearing. There are no press conferences, no paperwork trails meant to be seen. Only movement. Fast. Quiet. Irreversible. This is how governments act when time runs out. When trust in the system breaks. When the usual routes are no longer safe. You don't advertise desperation. You hide it. You disguise it as routine logistics. But routine shipments don't turn off their trackers. Routine deals don't bypass markets. Routine transfers don't happen in the middle of the night. This was urgency disguised as procedure. Fear wrapped in efficiency, a calculation made under stress. Because once the doors close, once the accounts freeze, once the signals go dark, there are only two things that matter: what you can move and what you can protect. And whatever was on that plane, it mattered enough that Venezuela wasn't willing to leave it behind. The clock was already dangerously low. So ask yourself, why would a nation fly 200 tons of silver halfway across the world? We've seen this movie before. Years ago, under mounting pressure, Venezuela's gold began to vanish the same way quietly, at night, routed through friendly airspace, bound for places far from Western reach. Planes tracked leaving with heavy cargo, vaults left lighter, destinations like Turkey and Russia appearing again and again. Back then it was called rumor, then speculation, then denial. Until the pattern became undeniable. Sanctions didn't trap the wealth. They forced it underground, forced it into motion. And now that same shadow play has returned, only this time the scale is larger, the timing tighter, and the destination far more telling. Sanctions are supposed to isolate, to squeeze, to force compliance by cutting a nation off from money, markets, and movement. But when the dollars freeze and the bank doors lock, what's left is what you can hold. What's left is what can't be canceled, blocked, or erased with a keystroke. That's when money stops being numbers on a screen and becomes weight. Gold, silver, cold, heavy proof. So the question shifts. If this was about survival, not profit, why China? And why right now? Because China isn't just another buyer. It doesn't operate like the Western system. China doesn't rely on trust in contracts or confidence in paper. It builds, it produces, and it stockpiles. It dominates manufacturing, controls supply chains, and thinks in decades, not quarters. And silver sits at the center of that strategy. Solar panels, electronics, infrastructure, China consumes vast amounts of it every single day. To them, silver isn't an investment. It's fuel. China doesn't chase paper returns. It chases resources. Here's the simplest way to understand what's happening. Dollars are promises. They work as long as everyone agrees to honor them. But promises can be broken, accounts can be frozen, systems can be shut down. Metal is different. Gold is cash you can hold. Silver is currency for the future. You don't need permission to own it, and you don't need a network for it to work. That's why nations hoard what can't be canceled. So ask yourself this. What if the world's money is built on paper, but real power still belongs to metal? What's ironic is that the pressure meant to break Venezuela may have done the opposite. By cutting the country off from the dollar system, the West didn't stop movement, it redirected it. Wealth didn't vanish. It changed lanes. It slipped outside the reach of Western banks, Western courts, Western rules. This flight wasn't chaos. It was calculated. A decision made after every other door closed. So this wasn't a random act or a reckless gamble. It raises a darker question. Was this flight an escape or a strategic retreat? When sovereign nations start hoarding silver, the impact doesn't stay confined to secret flights and sealed vaults. It ripples outward. Silver isn't just a store of value, it's a working metal. It's used in electronics, energy, medicine, and manufacturing. Every ton removed from the open market tightens supply just a little more. Less metal for factories, less for technology, less for everyone else. And here's the critical part. Demand doesn't slow just because supply disappears. So what happens when the metal quietly vanishes from the market? Watch what happens next. Not in the skies, but in the headlines. When control over a resource starts slipping, the narrative always changes. Language hardens. Stories soften the facts and sharpen the fear. Silver won't be framed as strategic or scarce. It will be framed as dirty, as dangerous, as something tied to conflict, corruption, or authoritarian regimes. Buyers won't be called cautious. They'll be called immoral. This isn't about truth. It's about influence. So ask yourself, what if the story you're being told isn't the real one? Behind the headlines, a quieter shift is taking shape. China isn't acting alone, and Russia isn't far behind. Together, they're building something that doesn't ask for Western approval. A system where metal moves instead of messages, where trade happens without permission. Silver and gold are exchanged for technology, energy, and protection. No dollars involved, no middleman, just resources for leverage. This isn't cooperation for convenience. It's coordination for independence. So the real question is, unsettling, are we watching the early shape of a new global order? For policymakers in Washington, this is the part they fear most. Not the headlines, not the speculation, but the math. The global system only works as long as the dollar sits at the center of every major transaction. When trade bypasses that center, power leaks out quietly. Influence fades without a battle. Military strength, economic pressure, political leverage, none of it functions the same once liquidity slips from your control. This is why the response feels tense but restrained. Because something is slipping away and stopping, it may no longer be possible. Does the West fully realize what's already leaving its hands? Silver doesn't just sit in vaults or line the pockets of investors. It moves through machines, through circuits, through factories that keep modern life running. It's inside smartphones, satellites, medical equipment, and defense systems most people never think about. When large amounts are pulled out of circulation, the strain doesn't show up immediately on a screen. It shows up later. Delays, shortages, higher costs, quiet compromises in quality and access. Someone always feels the pressure first. So when essential metal starts disappearing, who really pays the price and who benefits? This is where everything converges. That flight out of Caracas wasn't an anomaly. It was a signal, one piece of a much larger movement already underway. Across the world, nations are questioning paper promises and choosing certainty instead. Value is migrating from screens to storage, from systems to sovereignty. In this kind of world, ownership isn't defined by statements or screenshots. It's defined by possession, by what you can move, hide, and defend. And once that shift begins, it rarely slows down. So, if this is only the beginning, what comes next? From here, the road splits. One future keeps the dollar in charge, but under tighter control, more rules, more restrictions, more oversight on where money can go and who can move it. Another future sees metal-backed alliances grow stronger, trading weight for power and slowly redrawing the map of influence. And then there's the most unstable path of all, a divided world. One system built on paper and trust, the other on commodities and control. Each path leads somewhere very different. So which one does the world choose to walk? When countries shift their wealth, the shock doesn't stay at the top. It travels downward. Inflation shows up at the grocery store. Scarcity appears in places it never did before. Markets feel calm until they don't. History shows this pattern clearly. Those who wait for confirmation usually get it too late. Those who watch the signals, not the headlines, tend to move first. This isn't about panic. It's about awareness. So, the real question becomes, what should you be paying attention to right now? Ignoring shifts like this doesn't freeze them in place. It just leaves you standing still while everything else moves. Systems don't collapse all at once. They fracture quietly. Rules change before they're announced. Barriers go up before people realize they're trapped behind them. By the time the danger is obvious, the exits are usually controlled. Moments like this aren't loud warnings, they're soft ones. History punishes complacency more than fear. So when the next flight leaves in the dark, will you be ready, or will you be watching from the ground? History isn't looping back on itself, it's speeding up. The flight from Caracas wasn't just a secret transfer of metal. It was a message about how power is stored, how value is protected, and how survival is planned in the modern world. Paper fades. Physical things endure. And those who understand the difference early rarely explain themselves later. The signs are there for anyone willing to look. The only question left is, Are you listening? If you want deeper investigations like this, stories that connect history, money, and power beneath the surface, make sure you're subscribed, because this wasn't the end of the story. It was just one chapter.